You are watching the Poor Boys Horology podcast, the podcast for watch enthusiasts on a budget. Your host for today's podcast is Dr. Ed DeVries, an amateur horologist whose personal collection includes Timex, Rolex, and everything in between. If you are interested in dive watches, dress watches, designer watches, military watches, automatic watches, hand-winding watches, quartz watches, or pocket watches, the Poor Boys Horology podcast is about to become your favorite podcast. So click like and subscribe. Then sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of the Poor Boys Horology podcast.
We're going to do something a little different on today's Poor Boys Horology podcast. We're going to have a guest for pretty much the entirety of the show. And our guest is going to be Jeff Cook. Maybe you've heard that name before. He is a subscriber to this channel. He's also a personal friend. And in a past broadcast, I reviewed his watch collection. Also, he was the one who last year for my birthday gifted me with the Casio Duro, and that watch has made several appearances here on the Poor Boys Horology podcast. In fact, the Duro was a watch that I really didn't think I was going to be impressed with. But then Jeff sent me one because he knew that once I had it on the wrist, that my opinion of it will change, and sure enough it did. And it went from something that I was thinking I was just a inexpensive quartz watch to something that I believe is one of the most durable and stylish and just functional watches in my collection. And so anyways, I asked Jeff to be our guest today, and we're going to talk about smartwatches, and specifically why it is that Jeff prefers a mechanical watch to a smartwatch. We're also going to compare bracelets, especially the mesh bracelet versus other forms of bracelets. And we're just going to talk about a lot of different things on today's show. Before we start, I want to have a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a Rolex 116900. This is the Air King. And Jeff's always giving me a hard time. He says, why is it that you never wear your Rolexes? Jeff almost always has a Rolex on. He beats his up. It must be nice to be able to afford to beat up a watch the way he does. But that's why I don't wear my Rolex, because I don't want to beat it up. In honor of my friend Jeff, since he's going to be on the show here in a bit, I am wearing the Rolex Air King. By the way, Jeff's offered to buy this Rolex Air King from me on multiple occasions. So I guess if I ever am strapped for cash, I will send that to him. Now, that said, I tried to sell him a smartwatch, and he told me that not only would he not buy a smartwatch, he wouldn't let me give him a smartwatch. He's had a few people give him smartwatches, and he's given them back. And so that's why I asked him to talk to us today about smartwatches. Anyways, before we have the conversation with Jeff, what I want to do is I want to share with you the segment here that everybody seems to like, and that is our nostalgia segment. Of course, last month our nostalgia segment was a Ford Pinto. That was my third car. Now, my fourth car was the first brand new car that I ever bought. It was a 1993 Ford Festiva. I paid $5,300 for it and drove it off the showroom floor. Oh, to be able to buy a brand new car for $5,300 and drive it off a showroom floor. Anyways, what's even sadder is, for whatever reason, I've kept up with this car over the years. Have kept up with its VIN number to see where it had gone. And when I traded it in, it only had about 20,000 miles on it. And here back in 2019, I found the vehicle. It came up on a Ford dealership, on the car lot at a Ford dealership in South Carolina, with only 68,000 original miles. The car was still in beautiful condition, even with its age, and but the car wasn't moving on their car lot, and they tried listing it online, and they just weren't getting any bites. And so finally I told them, I said, look, if no one else will buy this, I said, I will give you $3,200 for it. Originally I was saying $3,000, but finally we ended up settling at $32,000. You want to hear a really sad story? My wife would not let me drive to South Carolina and pick up that car.
In a perfect world, money would grow on trees, so you'd buy any car you wanted. But this is the real world, where there are no free lunches and no free rides. A world where a Ford Festiva for only $59.62 could go a long way towards balancing your budget. And the 660 powertrain warranty helps protect your peace of mind. Ford Festiva, a real car for the real world.
Get 4.9% financing or up to $400 cash bonus.
To be able to own your first car all over again, or to be able to own the first brand new car that you ever bought all over again. How many of us wouldn't like to have been able to do that? I really wish I never would have got rid of this car. 53 miles to the gallon, folks. It was a 5-speed. It did not have air conditioning. And, of course, that combination was probably the reason for the high mileage. And that combination might have made it more difficult to drive, especially in 2019. I was living in Florida. Even here, living in Maryland, it still gets hot in the summertime. But sometimes in Chicago it got hot in the summertime. But still, 53 miles to the gallon. I really do miss this car. Anyways, I've got a couple of commercials here for the Ford Festiva. It was actually made by Kia. A couple of years ago, I was down in the Caribbean. I'm trying to remember where I was at now. I might have been on the island, like maybe of Curacao. I don't remember, but I remember seeing a Kia version of this car, the 4-door version. They did not sell the 4-door version as a Ford, nor did they sell it in the United States. But Kia made a 4-door version of this car and sold it around the world, everywhere but the United States. Anyways, let's watch these commercials. For 45-second commercial for our friends over at the Barnes Review at TBR, and then my interview with Jeff Cook.
Open your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
Hey Jeff, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Tell me, Jeff, why do you hate smartwatches?
You know, Ed, I don't actually hate smartwatches. They are just not for me. I think that smartwatches in this day and age, you know, I'm already too connected, you know, between work emails, text messages, and other alerts coming from my phone that, you know, when I've seen many other people that wear smartwatches, they're always looking at their wrist. You know, it's hard to have eye-to-eye contact with somebody because they're always looking at every text message, every email, or they're looking at how many steps they took from their fitness app. So for that, I like to stay with just good old traditional, you know, digital and analog mechanical watches on an everyday basis.
Well, of course, you know that I've not really been a fan of smartwatches either. But
and you know, I look at it as that mechanical watches and digital watches, and when I say digital, I mean, you know, when I'm out canoeing, rough and tough, mowing the yard, you know, running the chainsaw, I'm wearing my Casio G-Shock. You know, again, it's just a straightforward, it tells me the time, it keeps it accurately because I personally have an atomic Casio G-Shock. I never have to worry about the battery because it's always solar powered. Here again, on a smartwatch, you need to recharge it every couple days, depending on which smartwatch model people buy. You know, I've seen it that people have to recharge it every night or every 3 days or once a week, whatever the case may be. To me, that's just one more thing that I have to worry about. So I personally prefer a mechanical watch that self-winds while I'm wearing it, never worry about it. Or a solar-powered watch that recharges every time I'm outside. And even a battery-operated watch where the battery lasts for 3 years or more.
Well, you can remember the conversation that you and I had. It might have been a year ago now, or close to it. And I was talking about in fact, it was the Casio Duro, and I'm like, the battery only lasts for 3 years, and then I'm going to have to replace it. You know, a smartwatch, you have to charge that thing up twice a day.
Exactly. And, you know, to me, I like simplicity. And, you know, I find that, you know, when it comes to mechanical watches, you know, I wear Rolex and Breitling. You know, when it comes to solar-powered watches, I have a Seiko Astron GPS watch and my Casio G-Shocks. And, you know, I just find it's one less thing that I have to worry about. I guess I always think if I'm Tom Hanks in the movie, it wasn't Lost. What's the one where he crashed in a FedEx plane on a deserted island? Castaway. You know, if I was ever Tom Hanks in Castaway, I would not want to rely on a smartwatch because after X many days, it's going to go dead. There's no smartphone that it's going to connect to or Wi-Fi to sync with. So, you know, I always think of it in that terms, as corny as it sounds, that, you know, my Rolex or my Casio, whichever one I had on my wrist when my plane went down, will indefinitely work.
So you had mentioned Breitling earlier, and we'll get back to smartwatches, but it's something that I thought that I wanted to ask you about and maybe have you tell our viewers about. Oh, this was probably, 3 or 4 years ago now. We were in the Caribbean, and I remember you bought a Breitling, and it came with a rubber strap. And you couldn't wait. I remember you went home and you ordered the mesh strap, the mesh bracelet for it. And then I remember you were so excited when it finally came in the mail. And then I remember you telling me how you absolutely hated it. So why did you not like the mesh bracelet? Give us a review of the Breitling mesh bracelet.
You know, the mesh bracelet looks nice, and when it's cleaned up, it actually sparkles. And it's not as the fit and finish when wearing it on your wrist is not equivalent to a Rolex. And I was getting a little chafing. You could feel kind of the sharp edges to it. And compared between the two, I thought if I'm going to wear a watch for dress occasions or dress up occasions, I would probably wear one of my Rolexes. I went back to the rubber strap on the Breitling because I got the SuperOcean model. So it is a certified dive watch in the Breitling collection. And I thought that with the rubber strap, one, it was more comfortable, and two, it was sportier. So based on my personal watch collection and choices and switching between watches, the Breitling SuperOcean on a rubber strap fit the time and the needs when I would be wearing it. So meaning I wouldn't wear it with a sport coat and a suit. I would wear it for casual, hanging around the pool, you know, going to the park, that kind of thing.
You say that. I specifically remember you wearing it with a sport coat and a suit on, I can't remember the ship now. Was it the MSC Migliveria? I can't remember the name of the ship, but it was a cruise ship.
Yes, it was MSC, and I can't remember the name. You know, yes, I can interchange between the two, but based really when I like to wear that watch and with the clothing styles that I choose to wear, it works better for me on the rubber strap, and that's how it currently sits in my watch case.
So how often, or do you not at all really put that mesh strap on it?
Not often at all. I kind of went back and forth for what I paid for it at an authorized Breitling dealer. I was forcing myself to try to wear it, and I just found myself not wearing it as often and not as comfortable. just kind of the fit and finish of it. And again, that's totally subjective on my part. I think Breitling makes a quality watch, as well as their different straps and bands that they offer to consumers. But for me, the rubber bracelet works best.
And the reason I'm kind of talking about this is back in the 90s, I had a watch, and it had a mesh bracelet. Of course, it wasn't a Breitling. It wasn't a high-end watch at all. It was, I don't know, maybe about $125 watch, and it had a mesh bracelet. In fact, it was a Seiko. And I had bought the watch because I thought that it just had a really cool look to it. But I found myself very quickly replacing that bracelet with a leather strap, because the mesh was just uncomfortable. It always pulled on my hairs. My dad had a Nato watch, a Swiss-made Nato watch, and it had a mesh bracelet. Of course, that was a very expensive watch with an actual gold. It was a white gold bracelet. It wasn't stainless steel. I mean, this was a high-end metal or mesh bracelet. I think it was 18 karat white gold, but it was the same thing. It always pulled the hairs. It was very uncomfortable to wear. And of course, now you're buying an actual Breitling mesh bracelet from an authorized Breitling dealer. So again, we're going to high end. And so I've seen high end, I've seen low end. And at least my experience and your experience is that mesh bracelets, whether they're cheap or expensive, doesn't matter. They're just not comfortable.
Well, here again, Ed, I think in the watch industry, and, as you've talked about in many of your other podcasts, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of styles of watches, and everyone has a different taste based on their personality, based on how flashy they want to be, not flashy, based on the clothing that they're wearing or the activity that they are participating in. And, I think the same goes with watch bracelets as well. You can take a watch and with one bracelet, it looks a certain way, the style, the look, the functionality. You can change that bracelet and you've completely changed the look and style and function of that given watch. And, I think all of us out there that like to wear watches and collect watches, that's what makes it so fun, interesting, and unique, is that we can change it up. What works for you may not work for me or for one of your listeners out there. So I think that's the individualness that goes with watch collecting and watch wearing. I think there's people in engineering that, want a watch that is immune to magnetic. There are those that like rubber straps because maybe it's safer at work. If they hit it with some tool at work, a rubber strap isn't going to break or dent, but if you're wearing some sort of metal, precious metal band, you would damage it, possibly beyond repair. I can remember as a kid in the 70s, I think one of my watches had a Spidell bracelet, and it was kind of like an accordion thing. And for me, I remember that always catching the hair on my arm.
Mm-hmm.
But
I used to love those bracelets because Timex has had them, and I used to love those bracelets as a kid. But somewhere as a young adult, it was like my wrist got thicker, and I didn't like them anymore.
Well, they were always kind of right. You stretched them to put them on, and then it was like a shrink to fit. So as you got older and bigger, sometimes it was too tight. I think here again with a bracelet, you have different holes. You can adjust it, smaller, bigger, tighter, looser. There are those that wear their watch down low to their wrist. There are those that like to have their watch almost go up and down their whole arm sometimes. Yeah. But, to each their own.
Well, I think that's the beauty of a Nato strap is it's always, it doesn't matter if you're swollen, if you're not swollen, if you've worked out and your muscles are a little bit bigger than they would normally be, or if your wrist is shrinking, it doesn't matter. Whatever your wrist size is that day, the Nato adjusts to it very easily. Whereas, a watch with a fixed bracelet, you don't want to be moving links in and out of it all the time. And that's why they make them with micro adjustments. But, still, you got to do the micro adjustment. So.
Exactly. And you bring up, when you say NATO strap, I have a Casio Duro, $40-$45 dive watch that is indestructible. Now, when I bought it, I immediately took the rubber strap that Casio shipped with it and put it on a NATO strap. And for me, that works. The watch works without fail. It's got a 3-year battery. It's very accurate. And I put it on a red NATO strap, and it now looks really sporty. Kind of brightens it up, and I personally went with a red NATO strap, so the red second hand would stand out a little bit better and pop when wearing it. So
is that what you've got on your wrist right now? What are you wearing right now?
Right now, I am wearing my Rolex 50th anniversary Sea Dweller.
Okay.
But within arm's reach, have my Rolex GMT2. As I was talking to you here, I grabbed and was holding the Casio Duro on the red NATO strap, and I was actually comparing the times to all my watches to my atomic office clock hanging here on my wall to see how accurate everything was keeping. And needless to say, we're all within about 2 seconds of each other.
So we're going to break for a commercial, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to ask Jeff about 7 specific reasons why he's not a fan of smartwatches.
Extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, read all about it.
So, Jeff, you told me after last month's Poor Boys Horology podcast, you told me that you liked the Tudor because it was a cousin of the Rolex, that you even liked the Timex, even though it was a Timex, just, because it's a very traditional, a very classic style watch, and, Timex has proven itself over the course of decades, to be a reliable timepiece. But you said that you were no fan of the smartwatches, that I could keep the smartwatch, and you sent me a list of 7 reasons why you would not want to own or use or have or waste your time with a smartwatch. And so let's just go through those 7 reasons.
So, yeah, I can go through, a couple of the reasons why I personally don't want a smartwatch, don't wear a smartwatch, and, why a good digital, whether it's battery operated, solar powered, or mechanical self-winding watch is my preferred style of wear. I think that the first one that jumps out to me is too many notifications. I think we're all bombarded by emails, text messages, alarms, everything. It's bad enough with our smartphones. And yes, I do like having a smartphone. I just personally don't think I need to have another smart device beeping, flashing, and monitoring my every move sitting on my wrist. I personally have seen people during a meeting, and instead of looking at me face to face or eye to eye, every time their beep or phone lights up, they're always looking down at it. And, kind of makes you wonder, can you get through a meal? Can you get through a conversation without worrying about what your heart rate is, how many steps you took today, or, who's texting you? So for me, I just think it's more of a distraction in our everyday life. I think back as a kid, my parents told me I watched too much TV. And that was back when there was only 3 networks, and maybe a government-funded PBS network. Then later on in life, we all had cable, and now we have 1,000, channels out there, and we still can't find anything. And,
is that the difference
the
between
internet.
TV in the United States and Cuba, and the United States and the Soviet Union? In the old Soviet Union or in Cuba, the government just admitted that it owned all the TV channels and that they were all propaganda.
Exactly. They control it, but I'm starting to wonder if they don't control it here in the U.S. too, with some of what we see out there. But I think the point I'm making is it's screen time. We sat in front of the TV as a kid. Then TV became cable, and we sit in front of the TV watching every sports. Then we have the internet. So now we sit on our iPhone or smartphone, I should say, smartphone and our tablets. And that's with the TV running in the background. We're watching our favorite television show or sporting event, and we still have our smartphone and our tablet going in front of us as we're sitting on the couch. I just personally, I don't need a watch also connecting me to more screen time. Right. So that's probably my biggest pet peeve of all of it. The second, reason is I don't need continuous fitness apps telling me how many steps, what my heart rate is, what my blood pressure is. I personally am not working out for the Olympics, trying to make the team. I'm not working out to ride run a marathon or an Ironman. So, here again, I try to eat healthy. I try to do some moderate exercise. But again, I just don't need to be fully connected to a health fitness app. And that's what I see a lot of people utilizing their smartphones or smartwatches for. The third reason, batteries go dead. Smart watches need to be recharged somehow, some way. It's hard enough to remember to plug my phone in each night. I just don't need another, smart device that I have to go out of my way to recharge. And, with my Casios, my Rolexes, my Breitlings, if I'm wearing it, they're staying charged up, whether it be solar power or mechanical self-winding power. So again, I just think it simplifies my life, not having a smartwatch. The fourth reason, I think traditional watches just look classy. They look like jewelry. They're a talking point. I've been in sales meetings with customers, coworkers, it doesn't matter, and someone will look at my watch and go, oh, is that a Rolex? Oh, is that a Casio G-Shock? And, a lot of times it lends itself to just talking about hobbies in general. You find out that they own a similar watch, or they inherited a watch from, their father or grandfather, or they too were, served in the military and their favorite watch was, maybe a Casio G-Shock, and that it literally is bulletproof or bomb-proof. And so I, for those reasons, just like the classiness of wearing, if I am wearing a suit, coat, tie, a tuxedo, I just don't think a smartwatch fits that style at all. I think the fifth reason, smartwatches are disposable. I think for what smartwatches cost, whether it's an Android watch, an iPhone, or some of the other brands that are out there, after 2 or 3 years, 4 years, whatever the case may be, it's either outdated or the battery has just lost its ability to recharge. It's a consumable. So I think whether you're paying $200, $600, whatever the price is, I just don't see myself the return on investment. If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I can go buy a nice watch with many other brands to choose from. And 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, I'm still going to have that watch, and I could possibly even be handing it down to my kids. But I've never heard of anyone passing down a smartwatch in the family. The sixth reason, I already have a smartphone, and I don't need to duplicate what my smartphone can do with another electronic device just sitting on my wrist. I can already look at my emails, get my text messages, answer the phone. To me, the two smart devices essentially do the exact same thing. And, again, I've had my own kids say, why do I even wear a watch? Because you have a clock on your phone. I said, yeah, but I got to take the phone out of my pocket to look at it. And then I got to push the button. I can just real easily turn my wrist over, 30, 45 degrees and look at the time. So that's probably the other reason. I think smartwatches always have to be connected to a smartphone or a tablet. Again, I'm not an expert in this particular area because I don't own one. But again, I think a smartwatch in itself, unless there's one that either connects to Wi-Fi, I don't know if they have their own cellular connection. But here again, if I'm Tom Hanks on a deserted island in Castaway, a smartwatch is going to die since you can't recharge it, nor is it going to stay connected and keep accurate time. So those are probably really kind of my top, 7 reasons why Jeff Cook is not a fan of smartwatches.
All right. I'm on the phone again with Dr. William Von Peters, who has been my personal doctor for the last 10 years. We have a dear lady in our church, Dr. Von, who suffers from Lyme's disease. Is there anything that you could do to help her?
Lyme Quest, and I've had people tell me that the Lyme Quest is the only formula that they've ever found that actually seemed to help them.
What is the secret of Lyme Quest that makes it effective when other treatments people are saying aren't working so well for them?
Basically, what it does, it will cross the blood-brain barrier to be able to get the body so that it can recognize Lyme. Because Lyme's is a spirochete that will basically go into kind of a dormant stage as a cocoon and then come out periodically to replicate and then go back dormant again. And so as it's doing this, it gradually destroys the immune system. So what we've done is basically use the homeopathics that deal with the spirochete so that the body will recognize it and it get past its camouflage so that it can act against it. And so that the most people will notice an improvement in their symptomology and everything as their immune system becomes stronger and not depleted by the Lyme spirochete. Because homeopathy, the philosophy is like cures like. And whereas allopathy, which is what the MDs use, is opposite cures. So, if you have something that, for example, if something's too hot, you give something that would cause a heat in the body, and it will tend to dissipate the heat then. Such as coffee on a hot day is an example of that in real life. We don't make, in none of our products do we make medical claims for. It's just to assist the body in healing and being able to heal itself, but we make no medical claims for it.
And so if somebody wants to get Lyme Quest, try it for themselves, what do they need to do?
Basically, just go to the website for a company, LifeQuest Formulas, and so that would be www.life, Quest, Quest, Formulas, that's plural, lifequestformulas.com.
All right, lifequestformulas.com, and for our radio listeners who happen to be watching on YouTube, that'll be on the screen as well. You'll want to go to LifeQuest Formulas, and you'll want to check this out, and you'll want to check out some of the other homeopathic products that Dr. Von Peters is offering there as well. So have you ever had a smartwatch?
Never have, and I don't
Okay.
want one. I did have one offered to me as a gift, and I politely asked them, to return it, get their money back. It was a great gesture. It was very thoughtful, but I just personally, for all those 7 reasons that I discussed, have no interest or a need for a smartwatch, and I just didn't feel that it would be right to accept it as a gift and never ever wear it.
Right.
Use it, let alone wear it. And if they would ever ask me, why don't I wear it? I thought that was a worse conversation to have than to just say, and politely, thank you, but no thank you.
Because in playing with smartwatch, you talked about how, you already have a camera, you already have a tablet, and so forth. Some of the features on the smartwatch, like, for example, the camera. You're not really using your phone, or rather, you're not really using your watch to take a picture. Your watch is linked to your phone, so you're tapping buttons on your watch to take a picture with your phone. It's like, if I'm going to do that, why don't I just tap the buttons on my phone and take the picture with the phone?
Exactly. And the funny thing is, until you told me that, Ed, I had no idea, because I know there's a way to do it, but since I've never personally used a smartwatch, so I just learned something new.
Or it's the same thing with your text. You can read your text on your watch, but for that to work, it has to be within however many feet of your phone, which means your phone is probably on your person. And it's, why would you want to try to read or type a text on a little itty bitty, 1-inch square watch screen when you could do it on your phone?
Exactly. And, as I was listening to you explain that to me, with text messages, I think an 8th reason just came into mind, and that is, you never, ever will have an excuse to tell your wife, your spouse, significant other, or your friends that you missed their call or you missed their text message. Because this goes back to, you're always connected, right? I may leave my phone on my office desk to go get something to eat for lunchtime. But if I have my smartphone on my wrist, I've just taken away every excuse there is to say, oh, I'm sorry that I missed your call or I didn't get your text. And I find, after being married for 32 years, I kind of want that excuse sometimes.
Phone with our good friend Clint Lacey. So your newest project is you've started a publishing company, Foothills Media, and you'll be publishing 3 tremendous books. The first of those is your book, The Beginner's Guide to False Flags. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that book?
If you were wondering how we ended up at this point in our history and everything's going on, Beginner's Guide to False Flag takes you from the beginning of the country until the election of Donald Trump, Charlottesville, the rise of the communists, and the Russian collusion hoax. The rape of Delaware County is a story in which a United States veteran defended himself against a known drug felon, only to find out that the local police were in on it. Crooked prosecutors, and one of those prosecutors was actually arrested coming back from an island in the Caribbean in a murder-for-hire plot. And it just details just how corrupt one small county can be. And in the book, I said that Delaware County, Oklahoma, in the past was a safe haven for outlaws from Missouri and Arkansas. And what the reader will find out, it still is. Blood in the Ozarks, expanded 2nd edition, 156-year-old government cover-up in which an out-of-control Union officer led his men to murder men, women, and children at a Christmas gathering in the Missouri Ozarks. I founded Foothills Media in 2019 because I'm dedicated to bringing you the truth.
Thank you, Clint. I know that our listeners are going to want to check out Foothills Media, so tell them how they can do so.
Well, you can visit us at foothillsmedia.net, and that will take you to our website where you can browse the books, read our blog posts, and catch up on news that you won't find anywhere else in the mainstream media. Foothillsmedia.net.
Your watch collection, Jeff, it's I don't want to say it's eclectic, but at the same time, for example, you have some Casios, you have some Seikos, then you have some high-end watches like some Breitlings, some Rolexes. So, you hit the high end, you hit the low end. Your collection's very diverse. Maybe that's a good word for it. At least, economically speaking, it hits all points on the spectrum. So
yes, and thank you. And my collection years ago, because I have always worn a watch, even as a kid, all through college, and in my professional career, I wear a watch. Sometimes I don't even take it off. I wear it to bed. If it's a waterproof watch, I'm wearing it in the shower. I have different watches that do different things for different activities. So, I still have a Swatch watch from 83, I think, when I was in college. I think I paid $25 for it. It's waterproof. At the time, I called it beer proof because I was in college, but it's water resistant, I should say. It's a collectible watch, and I put a new battery in it a couple of years ago after finding it in my dresser drawer, and it works, and it keeps accurate time. I guess it'll be, at this point, maybe help fund my grandson's college tuition. At what point I ever think of selling it. Then I upgraded to Casio G-Shocks post-college, starting my career, getting out, playing racquetball and golf and canoeing. And I bought one of the first original Casio G-Shocks back in the, mid to late 80s. And, to this day, that watch is still serving me, very well. Then I upgraded to, I think, at some point, my first Rolex GMT2 because I travel quite a bit for my job. So crossing multiple time zones, doing some international travel, and just at a glance on my wrist to see 2 time zones. So I always knew what time it was locally where I was at traveling, as well as what it was back home. So I knew when I could call my wife and not wake her up or, in the middle of the night. And then from there, I had some other Casio G-Shocks, which, some refer to as the King of G. It's one of the biggest watches they make. It's pretty well indestructible. It's vibration resistant. It's got atomic timekeeping. So here again, wherever I'm at in the United States, every night it's going to sync up. It's accurate. And, again, it's probably my go-to camping watch. It's big, it's easy to read, it's accurate, and it's built like a tank. And then from there, I expanded to, a Seiko Astron that my wife gave me as a birthday gift. And again, it syncs no matter where you're at in the world using the GPS satellites. It's solar powered, so you never have to worry about winding it. And it, too, is also dual time zone, just the model that she got me. You kind of see where I'm going here. I like dial watches, and I like accurate timekeeping. And then, from there, went to the Breitling, where you and I were together in the Caribbean in Grand Cayman. And, that watch has served me well. Actually, probably not my favorite watch, but I do like it. It's simplistic, and I just have the black face, black dial SuperOcean. And that's the one that I maintain on the rubber strap.
Okay, so I have to ask you a question now that you just said that, Jeff. You said it's not necessarily one of your favorite watches. And so, you spend $3,500, $4,500 on a watch, you kind of got to force yourself to like it. Whereas you spend $100 on a watch and it doesn't turn out to be what you thought that it was going to be. You know, you toss it in the drawer, you give it to your grandkid or your kid, or you know, you sell the thing on eBay, you know, whatever. Am I hitting on something here or no?
You are. If I was going to sell a watch in my collection, it would probably be the Breitling SuperOcean, which is in the 46 millimeter size. One, I think it's a little big, even though I am a big guy. I think it's a little big. And after buying that, then I ended up getting the Rolex Sea Dweller 50th anniversary. And it has become my everyday watch as far as mechanical watches go. I just find that I don't wear the Breitling. So I think if someone was interested in my Breitling SuperOcean with a metal strap that's only been worn, you know, very little, and the rubber strap that it came with, that would probably be the one watch I'd be willing to part with in my collection, just because of the size, and I have other watches that do what this watch already does.
But you don't want to trade me the G7 smartwatch for a Breitling SuperOcean, though.
No, most definitely not. I will wear my Breitling and have fun enjoying it over a smartwatch any day. So, you know, again, I enjoy it. You did say a few seconds ago for what I paid for it, I'm kind of forcing myself to wear it. Yes, that is the case. I do wind it up and wear it for a day or two, just, you know, to enjoy a little change in my watch wearing, you know, activity. And then I put it back in the case and, you know, there it sits for a couple more weeks.
One of our big sponsors here on the Poor Boys Horology podcast is TBR Magazine, the Barnes Review magazine, and one of the contributing editors at the Barnes Review is my good friend Harold Scharnhorst, Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. Harold is someone who I have enjoyed interviewing several times on both of my radio shows, and you know, if this weren't a horology podcast, I would interview him right here on this show as well. But Harold had a tremendous story to tell. When he was a little boy, his dad basically raised the army that repelled the Nazi invasion of Norway during the Second World War. And so Harold grew up with a dad who was basically the commander of the Norwegian Armed Forces. He was the leader of the Norwegian Underground. And then when the war was over, Harold and his family immigrated here to the United States. And Harold ended up enlisting in the United States Army. He ended up working some very interesting jobs. Currently, he is a professional photographer, writer, and broadcaster living in the state of Idaho. And he took all of his story and he wrote it down in a 470-page book. And this 470-page book has over 300 photographs. And the book is called An Immigrant Remembers. Harold sent me a copy of this book about 2 years ago, and I read it, and the story was fascinating. I could not put it down. An Immigrant Remembers. And you'll want to get your hands on this book. You really will. And you can do so. Of course, you see it on the screen, the cover of An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestovich Scharnhorst. And you can go to Harold's blog, www.halsharnblog.blogspot.com. That's www.halsharnblog.blogspot.com. That's up on your screen right now. You can email Harold homefrontbooks@alpinemontana.com, or you could go to Harold's Facebook page. Again, all of these contact informations are on your screen, or just mail $30 to Homefront Publishing, P.O. Box 55, Moyie Springs, Idaho, 83845. Again, it's on your screen. You want to read this tremendous dynamic book, An Immigrant Remembers. It was a story that as I was reading this book, I just couldn't put it down. And you won't be able to put it down either. And so you'll want to read this great story. An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestevitt Scharnhorst. Go back, hit rewind, hit pause, so that you can get your hands on this contact information and order a copy of this great book, An Immigrant Remembers by Harold Hestevitt Scharnhorst. Months ago, you told me you'd put a new battery in your old Swatch that you've been carrying around since high school. Did you put a battery in it for grins and giggles, or are you actually wearing that watch?
I put the battery in, one, to see if the watch still worked after all these years. I think I was more pleasantly surprised to see that the old battery that had gone dead had not corroded in any way. And I just took it to the local watch company. They put a new battery in for $8, $7, whatever it was. And
okay,
it's working. So, I think it sits in my collection now. No, I don't wear it. It's a little small on my wrist for my personal taste. I think I just get more enjoyment out of seeing it in the collection, knowing kind of the history of it, where I've worn it. And, in 1983, I think, when I bought it at the local department store for $25, and however many years later, it's working.
Oh, Jeff, man, you're killing me here, because I got my first watch in 1986 at the local department store, and I had to pay like $60.
Well, obviously you shopped at better department stores than I could afford.
Or maybe they just raised the price of them, because by 86 they were cool. In 83, you were probably ahead of the curve on that thing.
Possibly. I first saw it during a trip to Australia, to Sydney, Australia, and someone had one, and they just then became available in the United States. And so I bought one as soon as they became available. I have one of the original collectible Swatch watches, which the face, it's black, and in multicolors it says, "Don't be too late."
All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to chat about today, Jeff? Or
I just was handed down to me by my father, but my grandfather's 1953 Rolex bubbleback watch. And, this was a watch that my grandfather back in the day probably worked his rear end off, to save up for. I'm going to assume, Rolexes aren't as expensive, or weren't back then as they are today, but probably in, the time value of money, was probably still a big investment back in the day. But, my grandfather wore that until his passing. Then my grandmother wore that watch to honor him. And then in her passing, my dad had the watch, and it was just, part of his collection. And here, probably 2 months ago, he handed it down to me now. And surprisingly enough, it's a mechanical, you have to wind it yourself, watch. And, how many years later here, 60 plus years later, it actually is within 1 to 2 seconds accurate per day, which I just find so amazing. Took it to my local jeweler to be looked at, and they informed me that they won't even open it up and look at it because, gosh forbid, any gaskets, parts, anything happens, the watch is so old that it actually has to go back to Switzerland, Rolex Switzerland, to be serviced. But yet, I guess my point there is this is a collectible item. I can see many other, watch collectors out there that, and I'm sure you're one of them, that you'll be passing your watch collection, down to your son and wife upon your passing, or at what point you start to slowly get out of collecting and you just want, your friends and family to enjoy the watches as you do now.
Right.
And
well, I've got a 1968 Timex Marlin that was my grandfather's watch. It was his everyday beater watch for a number of years through much of my childhood, and I still wear it on a somewhat regular basis. And I'll put it on the wrist for a few days, and then I'll put it back in the box. But I wind it up. It ticks. It keeps good time, It's never been to a jeweler, never been serviced. On the other hand, I've also got another one of his watches. It was a Swiss-made watch. It was an RW Roamer. That thing runs about 15 minutes a day fast. And I haven't even tried to wear it in however many years now. But I'll never get rid of it because it was my grandfather's watch. And I also have an Elgin watch of my grandfather's, and it stopped keeping time. I don't remember when. But, again, it's one of those watches that it never works. It doesn't work. I may or may not take it and have it repaired one day. But I'll never get rid of it because, it was my grandfather's watch. And so, there's definitely a sentimental value to those pieces. And you're right. The smartwatches, I don't see anybody passing those things down.
Well, smartwatches don't last long enough. I mean, it's just like our iPhones. Every 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the number is, essentially you're trading it in. It's disposable, or you drop it, it breaks, it can't be fixed, or the battery just goes dead. And that's where I said for what smartwatches cost. And even if somebody gets a free smartwatch when they buy a new, phone, that cost is built in, to your service plan and phone one way or another. Again, I think, mechanical watches for me, there's a personality to them. There's a soul to it. So, whether it's a Vostok Russian dive watch, made back in the Cold War, or a Casio watch running on a battery to a Rolex, self-winding mechanical watch, to me, they just have personality. They have soul. And that's what intrigues me over what I would call a sterile smartwatch.
Jeff and I's conversation went on just a little bit longer, and it was a good conversation. And I think I'm going to share it with you next month on the August Poor Boys Horology podcast. I also have a watch box that I want to review in the August podcast. You say watch boxes, we've seen 100 of them, but I promise you've never seen a watch box like this one. It's the awesomest watch box that I have ever seen, and I'm going to explain to you why it's so awesome in the August podcast. So be sure to tune in again next month. In the meantime, click like, click subscribe, and be sure to share with your friends the links to this and back episodes of the Poor Boys Horology podcast.